So good morning, everyone. It's my pleasure to welcome you to our continued administrative response support session series for the 2021-22 school year. My name is Rosie O'Brien-Wojtek, and I'm the Assistant Director, Executive Director for the Connecticut Association of Schools. Today's session is implementing rigorous, high-quality play-based learning experiences in the early grades. We're thrilled to have Oswegatchie Elementary School Principal Joe Macrino as our special guest this morning to discuss some of the exciting work he and his faculty and staff are doing at Oswegatchie Elementary School. Once again, we at CAS are very excited to collaborate with the Office of Early Childhood, the Connecticut State Department of Education, and the Regional Education Service Center's RESC Alliance to support the needs of all of Connecticut's youngest learners, including children with special needs and other vulnerable populations. During each of our monthly sessions this year, you will have an opportunity to reflect upon your current practices around specific topics, as well as to dive deeper into each topic and discover effective strategies and techniques based on research and best practices. Today, we will continue to dig deeper into developmentally appropriate practices and intentional play-based learning in the early grades. You'll also have the opportunity to meet with colleagues across the state, as well as some of our early childhood specialists from the RESC Alliance to exchange ideas and strategies on building and implementing a meaningful early childhood curriculum. There's so much to think about as we design and implement teaching and learning during this 2021-22 school year, especially for our youngest students across the state. So we're really glad that you're joining us today. Just a couple of quick reminders. Everyone has been muted to begin with, but once you get into the breakout rooms, please unmute yourself to talk with each other. If possible, please turn your video on, as it's nice to be able to see everyone, especially when we're working in small groups. When we're working as a whole group, please ask questions in the chat or raise your hand with the button at the bottom of the screen to be recognized. Also, please use the chat feature as questions to ask questions, share ideas, and let us know if you experience technical problems during the Zoom meeting, as we will be monitoring the chat. However, when you're in the breakout rooms, the chat feature is only seen by the people in the breakout rooms. If you have questions or need help when you're in the breakout room, please use the help button and one of our hosts will respond. This webinar is being recorded, but only during the whole group activities. We're unable to record the small group conversations during the breakout room portion of the webinar. However, the rest of the webinar will be recorded and will be posted for future viewing on the CAS, OEC, CSDE, and RESC websites. So please be sure to share this link to this webinar with your colleagues once it's posted. And please invite your administrative colleagues to join us for future sessions. These sessions will be held on the first Thursday of every month from 9 to 10 a.m. Again, I'd like to welcome and thank all of you for joining us today. It's now my pleasure to introduce our facilitator and get us started for this continued early childhood administrative response support session. Please join me in welcoming Judy Courteau. Judy is an early childhood special education teacher and early childhood consultant from Ed Advance. And now here's Judy.
Thank you so much, Rosie, and welcome everyone to our monthly administrator responsive support session. Over these last months, we've really delved deeper into the understanding of early brain development and how that impacts learning for our young children. We've also explored more of the NAEYC's developmentally appropriate practices for our young children. And so as we have explored all of those topics, as early childhood administrators and professionals, we have always understood the power of intentionally planned, play-based, joyful learning experiences, right? However, implementing those practices in the early elementary grades has been very challenging. So today we are going to hear from a school principal, Joe Macrino, as he highlights his experiences in implementing rigorous, high-quality, play-based early learning experiences. Joe is in his 4th year as principal of Oswegatchie Elementary School, which is a pre-K 5 school in Waterford, Connecticut. He was the 2018 CAS, Connecticut Association of Schools, Assistant Principal of the Year, and before administration, he taught 3rd and 4th grade. Joe also participated in the UConn School of Education NEAG Pre-K to 3 leadership program. As you listen to him, we encourage you to put your questions into the chat, and you will, as Joe explains what he has done to support such an amazing model for learning, he may answer your questions, but we'll go back to the chat at the end, and if there's anything that was not answered, we'll give Joe an opportunity to respond to that. So it really is my privilege and all of our privileges to be able to have Joe Macrino with us today. So please join me in welcoming him. So welcome, Joe, to our early childhood administrator responsive support session.
Thank you, Judy. And thank you to everybody who made the time to be part of this, because it is, as we all know, so important. I'm not going to speak too much to the why, because I think anybody attending this meeting, that would be like preaching to the choir. We're here because we know it's what's best for kids. I think both brain research and common sense shows that. So I'm going to talk to you about the how we got things going at Oswegatchie School. We have miles to go before we sleep, and by no means am I an expert, but I do want to share with you how we're getting the ball rolling here at my school. So none of this, my trajectory in my career would not have been as focused or passionate if it weren't for that NEAG pre-K through 3 leadership experience. That's where my mind really started to change as a principal and as a father. So I have a 3rd grader and a 6th grader at this point. And this is also that program affected how I parent as well. But basically, I started to look down rather than constantly look up. And what I mean by that is, I think for a long time as an instructional leader, I was saying, okay, how do we get them ready? How do we get them ready? How do we get them ready? Even though I would constantly bristle every time I heard, well, kindergarten is the new 1st grade, and 1st grade, no, they're kindergarten just in the. I got censored for a second. I was muted. But the terminology of kindergarten, this is a garden where we're helping kids grow. And we need, I feel personally, I won't jump on a soapbox, but we have to continue to look down at the best practices of pre-K, K, and continue to move that up, all the way up. This is not just a pre-K through 3 thing. This goes all the way up. Right before we started this, the session today, we were speaking, and I had mentioned that I don't understand why, and I'm guilty of this as well, where we think as soon as kids cross the threshold into 3rd grade, that stuffed animals and footsie pajamas and nightmares no longer exist. They're still kids, and we need to embrace that, particularly right now, if not more than ever, that we have to push forward this and recognize that we are working with children. Just if you work in a pre-K through 3, which I did in the past. Hi, Kelly, nice to see you. We thought 3rd graders were the top of the food chain and that they should be the example, and that we had to hold them to higher disciplinary standards. And now that I'm a pre-K through 5 school, all of a sudden the 5th graders, we expect them to be responsible, independent adults, which they are not. They still enjoy Christmas and the elf on the shelf and all that, and we can't lose sight of that. So before I get too much off on tangents about what childhood is and how we maintain that, I want to talk to you about my struggle. And I'll be honest with you, this is, as I said, I'm no expert. This is a constant struggle in a positive manner, that in this realm where we support purposeful play, which is a relatively new idea to the professional and to the layperson, that I feel that I'm on the defensive, that I always have to define what we're doing and really focus on the branding of it. If you say you need financial funding for purposeful play, those who are not at the forefront of this work, you're going to have to answer a lot of questions and defend yourself, which is fine. You have to find the right wording. You have to find the right Trojan horse to get this work going, because there is no cart before the horse or the horse before the cart. You just have to jump in, take risks, and learn along the way. So I kind of have 6 steps that I've outlined as to how we got to where we are. As I said, we're in a good spot. We can always do better. I'm amongst 3 elementary schools in my district. I have 2 pre-K classrooms. Another school down the road has 2 pre-K classrooms. And our third school, hopefully next year, will be getting their first pre-K classroom. So even though all 3 administrators are aligned philosophically, we all have our individual needs. So we're trying to come together and chart a course together where we can have some assured practices amongst all, eventually, hopefully 5 classrooms. And where we started here at Oswegatchie is, and personally as a principal, I think step number 1 is read. Do as much research as possible. I think that goes without saying, but you're going to need to become a quick expert in this realm. And where I started was with this. This is, we used a creative curriculum, but even if you don't, the Fidelity Tool teacher checklist is what I use as an administrator, not having a strong background in early childhood when I started. And this was a great help for me because it's filled with checklists, and it was never used in an evaluative manner. But I needed something to share with my team at the foundational level saying, okay, we're all at different spots. Let's have one document we can all look at. I'm going to be coming through over the next couple of weeks, and we're all going to be looking at page, whatever, 13 and 14, classroom environment. And that's where we started. What does the classroom physically look like? That way we can align classrooms that are in the same building together. That way we can inventory resources and figure out what are the musts in each classroom, and then to work on progress. Okay, we did well, we checked these boxes. We haven't checked these boxes yet. So let's continue that work. And that's really the beginning work for us, was checking the boxes. Are we aligned? How many boxes are checked? And what do we do from there? And then step 2, as a result of this, and I don't want to simplify this too much, but this is literally what we did. We bought kitchens, we bought blocks, and we bought water tables. Those we decided were the 3 assured experiences that every kid could experience, that every teacher could experience. I'm speaking pre-K, that's where we started, but this is how we also then move this work into kindergarten. So pre-K and K at my school, everybody has those, that's where we started. Those were where we put the money to begin. And even before the planning and the intentional work, if you place those in the classroom, things will start to change organically, magically even. Because they're sitting there, the kids become interested, you have that instant engagement, and then the teacher knows it's there, the money was spent, I have to use it. And I would check in. I said, okay, so how are you using this? How much time a day are you using this? And that's the other big thing. That's number 3. Put playtime in the schedule and make it sacred. No matter what your schedule looks like, there should be a defined time for play as you start out. Now, hopefully, as we work towards a more succinct program, that just becomes embedded and it's part of what we do all the time. And it's just understood that when you walk in, it's a play-based environment. But until you get to that point, it needs to be represented and held as sacred. That's not a time to pull kids for intervention or special ed services. That's the time when the adults come in and observe. And I think that's either 3 or 4 on my list. 3.5 is observation. Let the kids play. When you are starting out, you don't need a distinct roadmap. You just need to immerse yourself and immerse your staff, not just the teacher, but the paras, the PE teacher, the art teacher, the music teacher, speech and language pathologist, OT-PT, the whole 9 yards. They need to come in and they need to see what it looks like. And it was like a switch went off. The fears of, well, what about, we need to get to this, we need to get to this. When you start to see the level of engagement, the equity just starts to bloom. The child that couldn't sit and attend to that phonics lesson is now engrossed and is building exponentially their communication skills. So that's when you see that garden start to blossom. And then that's when the intentionality and the important work, the hard work, the heavy lifting starts to occur. So when we get to 4, that's when we really start to focus on the facilitation of the learning, defining the adult roles in the classroom. And I think to boil it down to the basics is the adults in the classroom, regardless of their position, their role then becomes masterful question askers. I don't know what the term, I don't know what the term is, but what kind of questions are you asking during the play that then makes it purposeful, which will eventually lead you to the connection to standards. And the connection to standards is what then allows the support from everybody. That's when the transformation happens, where it's not just, well, what are you doing in there? I just see playing. Where's the learning? We know the learning's going on, but we do have to quantify it. And that's the connection with standards. So you facilitate the learning, you question, you experiment, and you get on your knees and you start playing with the kids. I cannot stress that enough. The adults have to be part of the play. As before we started talking with everybody today, Jillian kept on bringing up the idea of the joyful play. You cannot go into this work with knitted brow and how am I going to get them to play better and this and that. You go in there and you remember what it was like when you were 5, 6, 7, you remember your favorite teacher. And I guarantee you that most of our favorite teachers were people that inspired us through hands-on learning. I don't know if anybody will remember that 4th grade teacher who, my favorite teacher was the teacher who really got me into the dictionary. Mine was the teacher that let me do an exploratory project on the Loch Ness Monster in 3rd grade. So that's embrace your favorite teacher. And roll up your sleeves literally, because it is dirty work, and start playing with the kids. And then that's when the learning really starts. Then you move on to what I call my number 5. Then you start building the units of study based on student interests that are directly aligned to standards. And I think once we start the facilitation, the question asking in those established play environments, and then when we start to build the units of study, it is, in my experience, it is essential then to bring in coaches. If you have that opportunity in your school, if you have literacy or math coaches, that's when you start to bring them in and let them get in on that ground floor right away. And it's a very healthy balance. They learn about purposeful play, and the staff learns even more about the connection to standards. When we implement the connection to standards, then we can start assessing formatively, and that's when we can share out, this is why it's effective. In this classroom, we implemented this is our journey, and here's the quantitative and to go along with the qualitative data that shows our students are learning at high levels due to the implementation of play. We were lucky enough. So when I was I started my administrative career at Lewin G. Joel Elementary in Clinton. And during that time, that's when I had the opportunity with Kelly Enoch as our director of special services then to encounter all the things that we learned in early childhood. During that time, I met Elizabeth Aschenbrenner, EA, who was a great inspiration, one of the patron saints of purposeful play in Connecticut. And as I transitioned to Waterford through EastCon, she provided us with a connection to Melanie Smith-Cervera, who is now our executive function coach in the district here. So we contract her through a grant. We are on, I believe we're on year 2. We started out in PreK with a couple of teachers. Now we're moving up to kindergarten and paras. And then next year, fingers crossed, hopefully, we're going to start bleeding into 1st grade. This is work I believe should go all the way up to grade 12, but I can't get ahead of myself. As Rosie knows, when I start drinking coffee this early, I want to push, but you have to be slow and you have to be intentional, because this is a new world for many people. So at this point, I just want to offer you a peek into my school. We prepared just a quick video, and then I'd love to answer with specificity any questions you might have. So without further ado, if you wouldn't mind sharing a little video.
We're making food and
Did you drive? Oh my gosh, look at
we are just cooking stuff
Are we ready
and
to
we're making dinner.
Okay, so we know research has told us that children learn best through play. So we have been working closely with coaches and EastCon to incorporate that play into our classrooms. Previously, I was a preschool teacher. We had plenty of time for play through our curriculum in that classroom. So transitioning to kindergarten, I wanted to make sure that these kiddos were able to have that same experience in our classroom. So we've been working closely with our coaches to develop play-based scenarios that incorporate our standards into practice so that we can defend why it's important, again, for our kiddos to be playing.
Today I am meeting with Melanie, and we are talking about beginning the process of play planning. My students have been engaging in the purposeful play, and I have the management down, but now we're going to kind of add the next layer and start teaching the students how to write about, plan what they're going to play, and then execute those plans.
And play planning is an integral part of our executive function work because it allows children to plan out what they're going to do what they said they were going to do, and then revisit that after play is done, so that children are using their working memory and they're using their self-regulation skills to make sure that they are implementing what they said they were going to do.
What are you doing?
Ready to work.
Ready to work. What are you working on?
Build a house.
You're gonna build a house.
So tomorrow we will be meeting with the coaches. We are going to look ahead at our poetry unit, and we are going to try to come up with some play-based activities that they can do. We're going to embed the poetry standards that we need to cover into those scenarios. Again, that will give kind of a guiding tool for us so that we can make sure we cover the standards, but we can also utilize the children's interest.
Ready? Let's do our T like we did yesterday. Ready? Line down, line across. Good, now get your sun.
That's just a little glimpse into what we do. Now, the majority of that footage was from a kindergarten classroom. As you can see, there was a lot of writing going on. And I'm telling you, if you have, so say you're starting this work and you have a board presentation in a month and it's countdown time, and you have to defend, prove, show that what you're doing is what's right by kids. The play planning aspect of it is your greatest springboard, in my experience, because that's where you directly go to standards-based instruction, where you have that quantitative data of kids actively writing daily. So it's to me, it's the perfect capsule that can cause all the growth in early childhood. You have writing standards, so they're constantly writing. You have the executive function aspect of it, so they're planning out what they're doing daily. And then there's that facilitation aspect. The teacher now has a reference to build off of. What are you doing today? Well, on your play plan, it says you were doing this. And in your play plan, I saw that you really are doing well with letter formation or your spelling or your spacing of words. That is just, to me, as a beginner in all this, that's when I really started to see, oh, this is how it all comes together. This is where executive function, creativity, and literacy standards all come together in a manner that, whether you're in education or not, you see that this is the purposeful end of it. This is where the learning occurs. And this is where, when you speak of formative assessment and growth over time, you can take a look at those play plans and how those kids are initiating the play plans. As an administrator, that's when I really go in to do my evaluation end of things and say, okay, how are the teachers and the staff members translating these plans into their plans for upcoming units of study? And when we are sort of out of that play realm, because it's not, although I do want that to be my next tattoo, all play all day. I think that's a perfect sign for what we're doing. There are times where, there is non-play, where it's instruction-based learning, which is totally okay. Some kids need that intervention, that tier 1, where you are meeting with small groups and getting down to the brass tacks with literacy programming or fluency, math fluency programming. But if you're really looking to hit it right out of the gate, I would suggest looking at, after you get the kitchen and the water table and the blocks. I'm not going to back down around that, and I'm not being silly. That was the key for us, the spark for those teachers. I wouldn't say that we had anybody with heels in the ground, but it's a big jump. People have been accustomed to, and mostly through the evaluation process as a result of us as administrators. How are you, where are your kids making progress? Where are they? How far along are they in foundations? So as an administrator, you have to support that. And you do, in the beginning, have to take things off their plate. Eventually, I think for those teachers that become proficient in this, they'll be able to embed everything. But for those teachers who are worried, I think it's the responsible thing to say, okay, for the next couple of months, this is going to be our focus. And as a result, we can back off of this other thing a little bit, because inherently it's baked in to what you're going to be doing. So that's just an overview. I don't want to talk too long. I like to have conversations, because that's how I learn best. And I would love to hear from all of you, whether what you're doing at your schools that you're proud of, or what validates or challenges your practice into what I presented. So go right ahead.
Thank you, Joe. That was so inspirational and so detailed. You really included so much of what we need to know about how to move forward. So the chat is open, and I am going to, with my other team members, share some of the questions in the chat, if you could answer them. This is from Diana Diorio, and it is, do you have specific programs you also use in kindergarten? Do you have a sample schedule of what the day looks like?
Great question, Diana. And I think specific programs, so we are in the process. No, I need to build a bridge from pre-K to K in terms of programming. Now, I'm very careful in all my communications with staff and everything that we are a pre-K through 5 school. We are not a K through 5 school with a pre-K program. But there are little things inside of that where pre-K is exceptional, where there are exceptions. Right now, we're using the creative curriculum in pre-K, and in kindergarten, we are aligned with the rest of our district curriculum. Most specifically, in kindergarten, we're using foundations. In pre-K, we are not, because we feel that the creative curriculum is covering that. There are some contrasting views on that amongst my colleagues and I, and that's something that we're going to look at the end of the year to see, is that a bridge? Do we have data to show that that is something we need to pull down to pre-K? Or opposite side of the coin, obviously, what can we pull up? In terms of the schedule in kindergarten, we have a basic schedule where there still are ELA blocks, math blocks, in your specials blocks. It looks like the rest of the 1 through 5 schedule. It's just that informally, we are expecting each other to embed that play within that time. Like I said, this is kindergarten's first year working with the executive function coach. So that is a work in progress. And by the end of the year, I think we'd be able to produce, and I'd be happy to share with you what a schedule in kindergarten could look like that specifically states time for play. I know now that kindergarten teachers at my school, when kids come in the morning, forget about worksheets. That's no longer a thing. None of those tasks. Playstations are already set up in the morning. Students come in and begin their day with that. And then when they go into literacy time, there will be a portion of that time based on the coaching sessions for kids to experience that. It's not completely interwoven in all of my classrooms yet. Rebecca, the teacher who spoke the most in this video, as she said, started in pre-K and is now in K. So in her classroom, it is play throughout most of the day and embedded, with the ELA and math time embedded in there. That's still on the schedule as math and ELA, so our interventionists come in. In my 2 other preschool classrooms, it is a more standard approach to the daily schedule, and they are experimenting with the play. So I'm sorry, that's a roundabout way. We are working on, it's a work in progress.
Thank you.
Do you have any?
Thank you. There was a question around executive function, and I know that Jolie put in a resource in the chat. So folks, if you would like to look at that, and also just referencing the Connecticut Early Learning Development Standards, when you come into cognition and look at that area, there's so much information in there on executive function and working memory and cognitive flexibility. So those are great resources as well. Let me see what else. Oh, and this is really critical too. This is from Andrea. Thank you, Andrea. And it's so important to make that connection with families so that we're on the same page as families. Families are on the same page as us. So how do you have that conversation with them around academics and the importance of an academic learning within the context of a play-based approach?
I love this question because although we haven't been challenged yet, you do have to be proactive and educate yourself so you can respond to any criticisms like this. And I think the administrator and the teachers have to become experts at the ELDS, the Early Learning Developmental Standards. That's where I think that's the most foundational document to go to and build from there. Here are the standards that are expected. You have to educate parents about developmental continuums and really speak to differentiation in the classroom. We are hitting the standards. This is how we're hitting the standards. And that's where the coaches come in to put those pieces together. And then ultimately, after you have 2 or 3 years, of which I will assure you, if you're doing this well, positive data that shows an increase in the literacy and numeracy skills as they enter 1st grade, you can always go back to that. But at first, you just have to literally sit down with the parent, have the ELDs in front of you, and with the teacher say, this is our intention, this is what we're doing, and here's a copy of the ELDs. If you would like to criticize, I'm going to take you on this learning journey with me, and here's some things you can study and have it be an ongoing thing. I am working on building an early childhood council for my district so that we can have those conversations, so that we can be proactive and say at the beginning of the year or in the summer, we're going to have a couple of informational sessions for parents so they know what kind of program that we embrace and what kind of program the children will be in. And the ELDs and the creative curriculum and the coaching work that we're doing and videos like this can be put together. They need to see it.
And that leads into, we're going to have time for one more question, and then we're going to break into small groups so that everyone can have a conversation and reflect upon what you spoke about today and consider what their next steps are. But one of the questions, two questions that are in there. One is Kay, have you used the alignment document pieces of the ELDS with kindergarten? Is there a connection with that? And also, you spoke about this earlier about the enthusiasm and excitement that happens as you go through this process. But is there anything you can tell us about how you were able to encourage kindergarten teachers in this transition?
Sure. So it's not an easy sell for everybody. I won't sugarcoat it. There are teachers for multiple reasons, whether it be tradition or fear of comfort with the content. It takes time. You have to realize that not every kindergarten classroom will begin or their pacing won't be at the same level in this. And once again, implement it in the schedule so it's a non-negotiable as an administrator, and get them the resources to say, this has been provided for you. These are the expectations. I am providing coaching for you, but this is really part of what we do. And then, like any good administrator, you help them out. You evaluate coming from a positive perspective, saying, last time I didn't see this, and this time I did see this. And it might be baby steps or it might be exponential growth, but you have to capture and celebrate every small step towards moving in this direction. But it could be very slow, and you have to let them know that you're their evaluator and these are your expectations. I'm not expecting you to push so hard in this old school, line by line approach to curriculum delivery that we are changing. And you got to, and this is the other thing, you have to make it part of your PD time. When you have district PD, put it on the PD schedule. That shows them how important this is, that we are committed to this, and it's part of their professional expectations. And I saw, are you following the ELDS and CCSS? We are starting to do that work, and we started last week. It's always been something we talk about, but formally looking at stuff in K, it's still Common Core, but we're starting to make decisions and tying things to the ELDS. That's a seed that is just starting to sprout here.
Well, thank you very much. Thank you very much. Okay, so we're going to go into breakout rooms, and Jillian, can you organize that? Joe is going to be able to join us in those breakout rooms as well. He'll move from room to room if he's able to do that. Sometimes we have glitches in our Zoom. And as you are in those breakout rooms, really reflect on what Joe was saying and talk with your colleagues and consider what are some of the next steps that you would like to do. We do have a note catcher that will be available for you. Jillian just put it into the breakout room, so you can click on that and open that, and we'll be able to document some of your conversations. So Jillian, if you could get us into our rooms, I would appreciate that. We'll wait a few minutes for everyone to get back into the main room, but I hope that everybody had exciting conversations. And I was going to just open it up to anyone who would like to just kind of talk about one reflection they had based on what Joe was talking about and what you talked about in your group, and just unmute yourself and share one of those comments. And I'm actually going to call on Kimberly because she was in my group, and her last statement was so powerful, and I want to make sure everyone hears that.
Yeah, no, that's fine. Welcome. I'm glad to be back and glad to be a part of this conversation and this thinking this morning. Just one of the thoughts that we have that we've been talking about is how when children are having challenges or dysregulated in classrooms, how are we adjusting and changing our instruction to meet the child's needs versus trying to change the child to fit into our structure? So it's really about trying to look at our instructional practices and what can we do differently to meet the needs of the children.
Thank you, Kimberly. You said that so well. Would anyone else from the breakout rooms like to share one or two important points that they talked about?
I would like to share, and Bernadette, I hope it's okay that I share this. Bernadette was in our group, and she mentioned the importance of, from an administrator standpoint, of giving almost giving your teachers permission sometimes, like reminding them in kindergarten, play is important. Play, this is great opportunities. And so she talked about kind of like trying to almost either model or just share that there is a lot of benefit in this, because a lot of teachers say they either don't have time or this or that. So I thought that was really important, that how you are as an administrator is going to impact how your teachers use this time. So I just thought she did a phenomenal job stressing to her teachers that there's great benefit, and then helping them find ways that they could do it.
And also connecting to what Joe said about making play be a written, consistent, important part of your program. Anyone else?
I was going to say, administrators need to take that risk. We need to step out of our comfort zone, and we are held to very high expectations by the people above us. But in order for our teachers to feel comfortable to take risks, we have to display that courage to kind of break the norm and do some, start some good trouble.
The group that I was in, we started having a great conversation at the end about the impact of what we would need to talk about with higher education, because there's almost a disconnect from what teachers are learning in college to how it shows up in the classroom. And we are taught to assess and to follow the standards, and you kind of lose that sense of play at some point in there, even across the younger elementary grade levels. And how do we bring it back to that focus before teachers come to the profession?
I did some informal evaluations while the kids were playing and wrote them up. So the teacher saw that it doesn't need to be during their prescribed literacy time. And I have to say they're my most favorite observations.
I was just going to add that I think one of the most important things that administrators can do is to model for their teachers what they want. And Jillian and I were talking a little while ago, and one of the things I did as a principal, every time that I got overwhelmed in my office, I would go down to pre-K or kindergarten and sit on the floor and play with the kids and just get rejuvenated. And I think the more that principals can do that and start asking those questions like Joe was talking about, and making it purposeful and meaningful for the kids while they're playing, I think the more we can model that for our teachers, the better the teachers are going to do as far as bringing in purposeful play.
Rosie, to build off of what you said, we were talking a little about the burnout and the number of people resigning because of all of the challenges of the pandemic. And what an opportunity. I mean, play is supportive of adults too, right? Teachers who are engaged in play with children can find some of that joy and passion that probably brought them to the field, and may help with retaining and keeping them enthusiastic and engaged.
Kelly, would you?
Yeah.
Oh, go ahead. I was going to say, I would love for you to share if you're comfortable with what you said, because it's so, I think this is the umbrella that we're all hanging under too.
Yeah, so I was explaining in our breakout session that in my district, we have very rigid scheduling with expected instructional minutes in each curricular area, with some very prescribed curriculum. And even though some of that curriculum is great, we're doing foundations, we're doing bridges, it's good stuff by and large, the teachers are very stressed about the idea of deviating from that in any way. And feel very overwhelmed with the idea, like they feel like this is taking on one more thing. And it's a very high performing district. So sometimes in a high performing district, trying to convince teachers of the need, like it's not broke, so why are you pressuring us, kind of a thing, can be challenging. So trying to think of a way to best sort of motivate them. Fortunately, the pandemic and the impact of the pandemic on kids is helping as an impetus for this. So for example, I was told from our director of special services that just be prepared, these kids coming up to kindergarten next year, they're not going to be quite where the kids were in the past, and they're kind of immature, and there's a lot of things they need. And so I'm like, well, this is perfect. This is perfect, because this is how we can start the conversation based on the needs of the students we're going to be receiving. So in a way, it kind of helps the conversation to get rolling, the fact that this all happened.
Wow, Kelly. I was going to say, wow, Kelly, that was terrific. Thank you for sharing that. So a lot to digest, a lot on our plates. But I think that, I don't know how you are feeling, but I'm feeling rejuvenated in these conversations. And I know that we can move forward with what we know is best practice. Jolie has put some more resources into the chat, so I hope that you're able to capture those. We do have some resources that I wanted to share with you, and you're also going to get our PowerPoint presentation, which will have the resources in them. And one of the resources that I just wanted to bring up quickly is just to highlight that in 2018, the New Hampshire legislature mandated play-based learning in kindergarten. And they actually use those words in the terminology. They talk about engagement. They talk about unstructured time for the children to discover concepts and to build their individual talents. So if you have an opportunity to look at that legislation, I just thought it was very important and very powerful. Our next conversation will be on March 3rd. And as always, our topics are directed by your input. And following the slide, there is a survey. And please hover your phone over the whatever that is. I'm always confused by what those are, the barcodes, and give us your feedback so we know how we can build on all of the wonderful work that you are doing. And Joe, just thank you so much. You're an inspiration to us, and I appreciate everyone's participation. We enjoyed having you here today, and just thank you so much for the important hard work you have. And please find joy in your work. Thank you, everybody.